Hello, all you fine, beautiful people. I'm back here once again with another video, and today I'm going to be doing something completely different. I'm going to be giving my tier ranking for the NFL 2024 season. Season started last night with the Chiefs and Ravens playing. Great ending to that game. As a Ravens fan, there's two teams I cheer for, Ravens and Vikings. As a Ravens fan, it sucks because it is the Chiefs, and I've become aware that it's just when you got rid of Tom Brady, you got Patrick Mahomes to take his place. But is what it is. So I thought, you know what, I'll come on here and just do a quick little tier ranking for the season, kind of go through it. So let's get into this. So on here you got for this is Super Bowl caliber is the top tier. Those are like the top teams that you think are at least Super Bowl favorites, contenders. Under that's playoff team. That's like your division winners, wild cards. Underneath that is barely misses the playoffs. I guess barely misses the playoffs, and the next one could kind of be put in its own thing of mediocre, because there's a bunch of teams that would fit both this category. And then you get the number one pick. This is like the worst of the worst. Anyway, let's get into this. I like this tier list because it was completely randomized. When I looked at all the teams, some of them I see the teams are all kind of in alphabetical order or in a different order. So I figured, you know what, let's go and try this. The Philadelphia Eagles. They're a playoff team, I think, for sure. Are they a Super Bowl caliber team? There is some questions I have about the Eagles, and I'm going to put them as a playoff team. I'm not going to. I know there's Eagles fans that are going to hate the fact I just put them as a playoff team, not Super Bowl. But there is some question marks. I really have questions about that secondary, about Jason Kelce's gone, your center. And there's also the fact, Nick Sirianni, how long before Sirianni's his way out of Philadelphia? And reading stuff where it sounded like last year, him and Jalen Hurts didn't get along very well, the quarterback. So I can see him as a playoff team, but I think that kind of keeps him out of the Super Bowl caliber for me, at least. Green Bay. I think Green Bay as well is a playoff team. Do I think they're Super Bowl caliber? I'm not sure. I think their offense, if it continues with Jordan Love, what he did last year, I think they are a playoff team. I don't know yet if I put them in the Super Bowl, but I don't think they're far off. That defense is Jordan Love. Was that 6-game stretch at the end of the year a flash in the pan, or is he the next Aaron Rodgers for Green Bay? I know Green Bay fans hope he's the next Aaron Rodgers, Brett Favre, just kind of continue that string of dominance in that division. But until I see it for at least 2-3 years, I still think they're a playoff team. Baltimore, even though they lost last night, this is interesting, because going into the year, I would have put them up here. After last night, are they here? I'm still going to put them as a Super Bowl caliber team, mainly because I still think that offense can get them to the NFL or the AFC Championship. I still think the defense is good enough, but it's hard after last night. That O-line, do I move them down to playoff team? It's really hard for me, because I'm like, this team, I think with Harbaugh and them, they have the pieces to be a playoff team. And I'll admit, I'm not the biggest Lamar Jackson fan in the world, but I still think they're good enough with the run game. I think they will figure it out by about the end of the year. They'll be at the top of that division, if not the top of the conference. So that's where I'm going to put Baltimore. I still think they're Super Bowl. They're at least, for me, in the AFC, they might be the AFC Championship, might be Baltimore and Kansas City. But we'll see. Ooh, Tampa Bay. Where to put Tampa? Tampa's an interesting team because a lot of the same questions I have about Green Bay, I have about Tampa Bay. Was last year from Baker Mayfield just a flash in the pan? But you still got Mike Evans as a wide receiver, probably still going to give you 1,000 yards. Defense, I think they're still going to be good, but you lost your offensive coordinator. Some pieces are coming in. I'm going to who's in that division as well. Yeah, I think I know it might be a controversial pick. I still think Tampa Bay could win that division. That division is brutal. Their only competition for me might be the Falcons. And I could be completely wrong, but I seen it out of Tampa last year. I still think they. I'm not sold on Atlanta with a rookie head coach. That's pretty much it. And Kirk Cousins as your quarterback. I'm sorry, I'm not sold on that. Washington, who it's very weird they have the old logo there, but Washington, at least for me, they could be back in here. They're not mediocre. They're kind of rebuilding. I think they're going to be back in here at least for this year. They have some great players. Terry McLaurin, great wide receiver. Defensively, they've lost a lot off there. They lost Chase Young. They lost Montez Sweat when traded him to Chicago last year. I think you have I think Marcus Mariota's here this year. Do I see them as a playoff or as a? I still think they're going to be in the contention for probably bottom 8 record in the league, but I could be completely wrong. But I still think they are in the bottom tier. Houston, I think they're a playoff team. Whether they win that division or win a wild card, I still think they're a good team. Like Houston with C.J. Stroud, Tank Dell, adding Stephon Diggs is a huge acquisition for them. It's going to really, I think, see where they're at. I think they are a playoff team from this division. There's probably only one other team in that division I think that is a playoff caliber team, but yeah, it's gonna be interesting. I think D'Amico Ryans and Nick Caserio down there are building a great team. You have Will Anderson there as well. I think this year, hopefully, their defense gets better because that was really what held them back last year was the defense. But I think it should be good. Just kind of going through here, make sure. Yeah, Dallas. Ooh, part of me thinks Dallas is this, but they're too good. I think Dallas is there. They're at least a playoff team. Say what you want about Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, Micah Parsons. they've lost a lot of pieces off this team, but I still think they could be good enough to get in the playoffs. The problem with Dallas is they virtually added nothing in the offseason, and I think they've come off like 3-4 straight 12-4 seasons under Mike McCarthy. I think they're good enough where they could win 10 games and get into the playoffs, but I think it's going to be the yearly Cowboys one and done for them, where they get into the playoffs and they're quickly gone. But I could be wrong. This could be the year Dallas actually makes the Super Bowl, which is weird because when I started watching football, I believe it was Dallas and Pittsburgh in the Super Bowl. That was the first football game I ever seen, and Dallas hasn't been back there since. So it's been a long time. Jets. I'm going to put the Jets as a playoff team this year. The problem with this is that division is stacked with Buffalo, Miami, and the Jets. I think if Aaron Rodgers comes back and even gives you competent quarterback play, I think they're going to be a playoff team, whether it be one of the two wild cards. I think they are a playoff team. I think Aaron Rodgers, even coming off of his torn Achilles, I think Aaron Rodgers, even on his worst day, is probably still better than Zach Wilson was last year. Any of the quarterbacks the Jets threw out. You have Breece Hall in the running game, Garrett Wilson a wideout. That defense is elite with Sauce Gardner. You bring in McKinley on the defense. That defense is going to murder a lot of teams. That is a Super Bowl caliber defense, but you just need the offense to put it all together, and I think they can. Oakland. Oh man, this is hard because I think Oakland, ever since that 2020 or that 2002 playoff Super Bowl run, they've been mired in this whole thing of suckitude. I feel sorry for Raiders fans. Like, I was never a huge Raiders fan growing up, but after a while, like, it's like you can't really hate them. All you can do is really just feel sorry for them. And yeah, I think the Raiders, they're kind of stuck in that era of mediocrity. You have some great players on that team. Actually, you have some really, really good players on that team. You have Max Crosby, you have Devontae Adams, you had Wilkins on the defensive line there, so that should really be shored up. But when you have Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell throwing you passes, I quite honestly don't think they're going to be very good this year. I could even see them in here, but I'm just going to put them as mediocre. On to the next team, Carolina. Ooh. This is really interesting for me. I'm like, Carolina, where to put them? Because this is all dependent how good Bryce Young is. Because if Bryce Young sucks, you're right back down here. And I think this year you at least get your number one pick. I don't think you're good enough to be here. I'm going to say if all things go good, I think Carolina is a mediocre team. They've never quite been the same after Jerry Richardson sold the team. Granted, had to. But they've just never been the same. Ever since Cam Newton in that Super Bowl year, it's just been like the continual crap bag for the Carolina Panthers. They are the definition of a mediocre team where every so many years they might get good, make the playoffs, they might go on a Super Bowl run, but it's few and far between. And if you're looking at them as a franchise as a whole, there's been a lot of mediocrity to the Carolina Panthers. Atlanta Falcons, ooh. This is getting really hard. I'm gonna admit it. As much as people are talking up Atlanta still has a lot of issues. I know quarterback, everyone's like quarterback and all that, but you're still trotting out there Kirk Cousins. And as a Vikings fan, I know all about Kirk Cousins. He's probably good enough to get you in the playoffs, but you're not going far with Kirk Cousins, your quarterback. Michael Penix, your draft number 8 overall pick, quarterback as well. Ooh. And with kind of unlike Aaron Rodgers, who came off a torn Achilles, and you're like, well, is he going to be this or that? I think Aaron Rodgers is still, even with his torn Achilles, a better quarterback than Kirk Cousins. I'm going to probably rearrange this a little bit at the end, but right now I'll put Atlanta as a playoff team. I think with Drake London, Bijan Robinson, Kyle Pitts, this is the year for that offense. If that offense isn't any good, I think you can start looking at all those guys as busts and overhyped. I don't think they're good enough to make the playoffs, or to just get in, but not really go very far. I think Atlanta is the prime example of another one and done team, or maybe Kirk surprises me, but it's between these two where one of them is going to win the division, but I still think the other team's good enough to make the playoffs. But I'll go around here and kind of make changes later. Chargers. I think this is a kind of a free year for Jim Harbaugh. He comes in. I know a lot of people think when he came into San Francisco and took him right to the NFC Championship game his first year and then the Super Bowl. I still think there's issues with this team. Who are they going to throw the ball to is a big one. But that really doesn't surprise me because with Jim Harbaugh, he's going to be running the ball. But Jim Harbaugh. And he brought in Baltimore's running backs, but as a Baltimore's fan, the one thing I know, Dobbins and Edwards are going to be injured at some point this year. And I still think there's a lot of holes. I think they're good, but I think they barely missed the playoffs. This is a year where I think they're going to grow, but I don't think they're going to quite hit that playoff level. On Miami, I think I'm going to put Miami barely missing the playoffs with the Chargers. I know that might be controversial, but I'm not a huge Mike McDaniels fan. I think there's something that's really been exposed is the Dolphins are good enough to beat up on the really crappy teams, but they're not good enough to beat the playoff caliber teams or the winning record teams. I know there's a stat where he's like where his team is atrocious against teams with winning records, and they're a team that always start off strong, but as the year goes on, they just falter. And Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Tua. I'm going to admit I'm not the biggest Tua fan, but I think this is really his put up or shut up year in Miami. I know he just got paid a huge contract, but you have to eventually get over the hump. But I think this could be a year they lost a lot of pieces off that team, and I don't know if they're good enough to make the playoffs. Where at least the Jets, with their defense alone, I think they could be a playoff team. And if Aaron Rodgers comes back and is at least decent, I could see him pushing Miami out of that wild card spot, or if not, the division. Next up, Cleveland. I have Cleveland barely missing the playoffs. Cleveland is a giant wild card to me because their defense is elite. That Jim Schwartz defense is good with Myles Garrett coming off the end. Nick Chubb's coming back, so that should help the Browns. Deshaun Watson, is he going to revert back to Houston Deshaun Watson, or is he going to suck? And that is very, very hard to know with Cleveland, because they go as Deshaun Watson goes. There's not the Joe Flacco this year, I think, to come out and help them make the playoffs. But is what it is. I think they barely miss. If they do miss, I think it's going to be barely, just off the strength of that defense. Kind of change this around so I kind of see what I got here for each conference, separated by conference. New England, welcome to life with the rest of us, Patriots fans. The Brady's gone, Belichick's gone now. You got Jerod Mayo. Gonna say right off the bat, I know there's some people that are high on a Drake May. I'm not. Until I see him actually play, I don't like the roster. I think it's very much you're gonna have to probably spend at least what I'm thinking, at least 2 or 3 more years of building, because that cupboard was bare when Bill left. And Bill was at least getting away with, he had the mind to at least get that team as good as it was for as long as it was. And I think once the talent started to dwindle, I think that defense was good with them. But it's not Bill there. It's Jerod Mayo, and how long before he's exposed for being another one of those Bill clones. The Detroit Lions, for me, Super Bowl contender. I like that team. Jared Goff, Amon-Ra St. Brown, great receiver. This is the first time, probably my lifetime, that I can say, you know what, the Lions, I think, are going to do really good this year. Dan Campbell. If Dan Campbell at least learns and says, hey, you know what, we could at least kick field goals at certain points and not keep going for it all the time and take some points, we might actually be in the Super Bowl this year. I'm going to say there's at least going to be 1 or 2 games where Dan Campbell's going to Dan Campbell, but hopefully he does it during the regular season and not during the playoffs. On to the next team, Tennessee. I think they're me. I think Tennessee could be sneaky good this year. Where do I put them, though? Because it's kind of in between mediocre and barely misses the playoffs. It really is all determined whether Will Levis is the guy there. But the rest of the team, I don't think they're terrible. Like, I think there's parts to it. They're not in this conversation for me. I'm going to at least say Tennessee, I'll put the mediocre. I'll at least say Tennessee's mediocre. They're not going to barely miss the playoffs, I think. I think they'll at least be in contention, but until you figure out what you got with Will Levis there as your guy, that could be really interesting, because if he's not your guy, Mike Vrabel's gone this year. He got fired. it's going to be really interesting to see where they end up, because this team's been virtually nothing other than that Tannehill couple years. They've been nothing since Aaron McNair left. And that's almost, God, that's about 20 years ago. New York Giants. Daniel Jones ain't the guy. You get out of that contract this year. Do I think they could win enough games to be kind of mediocre? But I think this year for the Giants, I think it really is going to be down here for them. I'm not sold on a lot of what they did. Like I said, Daniel Jones isn't the guy, but I don't think that defense is great either. So they're going to be down there. Denver, yeah, they're going to be. I think they're going to be the punching bag of the NFC West or AFC West, because I think they're going to be down in this area for the number one pick. It like a lot of these teams, it's all quarterback determined. Like, is Bo Nix the guy? And I really have a hard time believing Bo Nix, even with Sean Payton as his coach and what he's got there. They've lost a lot of players off that team. Sure, he's still got Patrick Surtain, elite corner. But eventually the bottom has to fall out. And I think they're going to be down in there. Minnesota, as a Vikings fan, down here. Or are they? I think the only thing that keeps them out of here is I think their defense or their offense is good. Yeah, I might actually put Minnesota here, barely miss the playoffs, because I think that defense is good. You got Justin Jefferson, you got Addison at receiver, you got Hawkinson at tight end. Their running game is always going to be all right. Their defense, I'm not sold on. Anthony or Harrison Smith is getting up there in age, so you're here. Sam Darnold's your quarterback. I think, they're in the mediocre realm until JJ McCarthy comes back next year and we see what he is. I think they're just going to be treading water. Granted, doesn't mean these teams can't make the playoffs, but there's kind of a stink of mediocrity around them. San Francisco, they're a Super Bowl caliber team. I think the problem is you paid Ayuk, you paid Trent Williams. Next year, you got to pay Purdy. You're eventually going to start losing off this roster and see where it goes from there. Next up, the Rams. I think the Rams are a playoff team. Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp. The only thing that kind of scares me is Aaron Donald left, so how's that defense going to play? But I think Sean McVay is a good enough coach to at least get them to the playoffs. And next up, Seattle. I think Seattle's going to have a falling out this year. I don't think Geno's the guy there, and Sam Howell is your backup. I'm not sold at the quarterback. I'm not quite sold at the running back position, but I think their receiving core is good. But unlike Minnesota, where you can kind of see some things, there's stuff about Seattle. I'm just like, I'm not sold on them. Like, I looked at their schedule this year and I'm like, they might be lucky to win 5 games. So that's kind of why I have them in here. Buffalo. I think Buffalo's division is probably going to win that division again, but I think it's going to be close between Miami, Jets, and Bills. I can see 3 teams from that division making the playoffs. I just can't. And the Bills and Jets, I just feel better about. This is going to be Sean McDermott, I believe is the coach's name. This is going to be his put up or shut up year. It's either you win now or when. And I don't think the Bills are going to be great. It's probably going to take them a couple weeks offensively to get everything going, because I think the one good thing is Stephon Diggs is gone. So there isn't that constant pressure to always throw him the ball. So it can be spread out a lot more. And I think they're going to turn into more of a tight end passing attack with the running game. So we'll see how they do with that. Jaguars. I think the Jaguars for me are a playoff team. I think with Trevor Lawrence, if he stays healthy with their offense, with their defense, the other Josh Allen, I think they're going to be good. I think what hurt them last year is Trevor Lawrence got hurt. They were 8-3, I believe, when he got hurt. And then I think they went like 1-6 down the rest of the stretch. So we're going to see how good Jacksonville is. But I think they are good enough where they'll at least get a wild card out of that. I think them and Houston are the 2 teams out of that division, I think, that are playoff teams. Chicago, I'm going to put them here, barely missing. I think they're good enough to be like one of the... It's between them and Minnesota for who's going to be the worst team in that, but I like Chicago's offense and defense more than Minnesota, which sucks as a Vikings fan, but I think this is the first time. This is going to prove with Caleb Williams as a rookie. This is probably the best Chicago Bears offense, weapon-wise, I've ever seen. And I've been watching since 96. That's insane. Like, when I heard somebody say that they've never had a 4,000-yard passer, that's insane. But it's understandable with the Bears. Steelers, the walking antithesis of mediocrity. We're good enough. We're going to win enough games where you might get in the playoffs. You might lose one game, or you might only play one playoff game. But you're not bad enough where you can get those players that'll get you over the hump. Mike Tomlin, great coach, but after a while, like, how many years can you kind of go like 10-7, 9-8, and that, and or even before that 8-8, and your team keeps you around? Like, eventually you're gonna have you run your course, and it's kind of the same thing with Baltimore and Harbaugh and Tomlin and the Steelers. And eventually came with Belichick and the Patriots. Eventually your life cycle just runs dry, and you can only bleed from a stone for so much before that happens. Cincinnati, yeah, I'll put Cincinnati there. I think Cincinnati's a playoff team. Playoff caliber. I think they're probably the wild card. Joe Burrow's back. It's probably just because quarterback-wise, these are the 2 best quarterbacks in that division. I think team-wise, you have Jamar Chase, T. Higgins. Defense should be good. Like, think about it. Even with Browning last year, they still won 9 games. Almost made the playoffs. So Cincinnati, to me, is probably a playoff team this year, just with Burrow being healthy. He was never healthy last year, and I think that held them back. Next team, Kansas City, Super Bowl, going for the three-peat. Not much to say. Mahomes. Arizona Cardinals, I think they're going to be good this year. Who are they? A sneaky Super Bowl contender? Or are they a sneaky playoff team? I'm going to put them at barely misses. I think Arizona is going to be better. You have Marvin Harrison Jr. at wideout now. Their tight end's going to be catching a lot of balls from this. McBride, I believe it is, could have a really good year. I think offensively they're not bad. This is really, for me, Kyler Murray's put up or shut up year as a quarterback and whether or not he comes back. But I think Arizona, not terrible. Indianapolis Colts. I think I'll put them at the mediocre spot. It's really hard with the Colts. What's Anthony Richardson? Sure, you have Pittman. There's a lot of question marks for me about the Colts, where the Jaguars, I can see like their offense is really good, and I think Trevor Lawrence at worst is an above average quarterback and can at least get you in the playoffs. I don't know if Anthony Richardson, like last year, was constantly getting banged up, and then done for the year. Playing some of that hero ball, I wasn't quite sold on preseason, but it is preseason. So, yeah, I'll have mediocre. Number one pick, Saints. Not sold on Derek Carr. Sure, you got Michael Thomas, Alvin Kamara, but they're old. Cam Jordan, I still believe, is there. I'm just not sold on the Saints. Their offense last year was putrid, but it could be the one year where, hey, they seem to just make it up. But not sold on the Saints. I think they're going to be in the contention for the number one pick. Let's see where we're at. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Then for this conference, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, because only 5. I think if I had to take one out of this to put barely missing from the NFC, probably would be the Buccaneers. Actually, no. Buccaneers. I just can't justify it putting them in the playoffs above, at least right now, Atlanta. After week 1, this could look completely different, but is what it is. So for my Super Bowl caliber teams, I got the Ravens, Lions, 49ers, Chiefs. Playoff teams, Eagles, Packers, Rams, Falcons, Cowboys, Texans, Bills, Jets, Jaguars, and Bengals. A lot of kitties in that. Barely misses the playoffs. The Buccaneers, Chargers, Dolphins, Browns, Bears, and the Cardinals. Mediocre is the Raiders, Panthers, Titans, Vikings, Steelers, and Colts. And the number one draft pick is going to be at least teams I think in this tier are Washington, New England, Giants, Broncos, Seattle, and New Orleans. I'm probably wrong. It's probably going to be nowhere near correct because there's always surprises every year. But anyway, that's my video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Tell me where you would put some of these teams, but this is me signing out. Peace.